The research ship Odyssey hung in the silent blackness above a dead world. The planet below was a giant ball of white and blue ice. It was a lonely place, far from any busy space lanes. The Odyssey was not a warship. It was a ship of science. Its smooth, curved shape built for quiet study, not for fighting. Inside, on the command bridge, Captain Su-Jin looked at the ice planet on the main screen. She was a serious woman with a calm face. Her job was to keep the ship and its crew safe. Next to her stood Jun, the lead scientist. He was older, with careful eyes that noticed every small detail. He adjusted his glasses as he looked at the data on his tablet. "Readings are stable, Captain," Jun said. "The atmosphere down there is thin but breathable. The cold, however, is extreme." Su-Jin nodded. "And the signal? You are sure it is not a natural formation?" "Positive," Jun replied. "The structure is metallic. Its shape is too perfect, too angular to be a rock. It is a ship. And based on the mineral crust around it, it has been buried in that ice for a very, very long time." Down on the frozen surface, a small team was working. They wore thick environment suits to protect them from the biting cold. The wind howled around them, kicking up clouds of sparkling ice dust. The leader of this team was a young xenoarchaeologist named Min Su. His job was to study alien life and old ruins. Right now, his heart was beating fast with excitement. In front of them, partly dug out of a giant wall of blue ice, was the ship. It was nothing like the smooth, graceful ships of the Galactic Concordance. This ship was all hard angles and sharp edges. It looked tough, like a weapon. Its dark metal hull was scarred and pitted, telling stories of a long-forgotten battle. "Minsu, can you hear me?" Jun's voice came through the radio in Minsu's helmet. "What is your status?" Minsu touched a button on his suit. "We are at the entrance now, Jun. The ice excavation is complete. The hull has a breach here. It looks like a damaged airlock. We are going inside. Be very careful," Jun warned. "We do not know what is in there." "Move slowly." Minsu took a deep breath. He led his team through the broken metal doorway and into the darkness of the ancient ship. Inside, it was like stepping into a tomb. The air was still and frozen. A thin layer of frost covered everything. The corridors were dark, and their suit lights cut through the blackness, creating long, dancing shadows. They saw control panels with buttons and screens that were dead and silent. They saw chairs and tables bolted to the floor. They moved deeper into the ship. It was a ghost town made of metal. They found rooms that looked like living quarters. They found a large room that might have been a mess hall where the crew once ate. But there were no bodies. No signs of what happened to the people who flew this ship. Then they found the door. It was at the end of a main corridor, bigger and stronger than the other doors. It was sealed shut. Minsu used a laser cutter from his toolkit. The bright light of the cutter sparked against the metal, slowly burning through the old lock. With a loud clunk, the door loosened. Minsu and another crew member pushed. The heavy door slid open with a groan that echoed through the silent ship. The room behind the door was large and circular, and in the center of the room, under a blanket of frost, was a single large pod. Minsu walked towards it, his boots crunching on the frost-covered floor. He wiped the frost from the pod's glass window with his gloved hand. He saw a person inside. It was a female. She had dark hair and sharp, peaceful features. She seemed to be sleeping. She was dressed in a simple gray suit. The pod had lights on its side, and one of them was blinking with a slow, steady green rhythm. "Jun, Captain," Minsu said, his voice a whisper full of wonder. "We found someone. A survivor. She is in a cryopod. The system. It looks like it's still working." Back on the Odyssey bridge, Su-Jin and Jun looked at each other. A survivor from a ship this old was impossible. It was unbelievable. "Life signs?" Su-Jin asked, her voice tight. Minsu held up a scanner. The device beeped softly. "It's reading one life sign. Dormant, but viable. It's weak, but it's there." He looked at the symbols on the side of the pod. The ship's database calls her species Terran. And her name, it says her name is Ji-Hai. The news spread quickly through the Odyssey. They had found a living relic. A person from a past so ancient no one even remembered her people. A big discussion started on the bridge. Jun was very worried. "Captain, we must be cautious. We do not know anything about her biology. She could carry diseases our medicine cannot fight. Her pod could have security systems we cannot understand. This is a huge risk." Su-Jin listened. She was a practical person. The Galactic Concordance was a peaceful group of many planets and species. But peace was sometimes fragile. They knew the Terrans were a warrior race. Stories said they were fierce and strong. Understanding them, learning their secrets could be very valuable. She is a person, June, Sujin said finally. And she is alone. We cannot just leave her sleeping in a block of ice. We have a duty to try. She made her decision. We will bring the pod to the ship. We will put it in the main lab. Then we will try to wake her up. The crew worked for hours. They used heavy machinery to carefully cut the pod free from the ice and carry it back to the Odyssey. They placed the large, silent pod in the center of the main laboratory. The green light kept blinking, slow, steady. Min Su stood next to the pod looking at the woman inside. She did not look like a fierce warrior. She looked peaceful. He felt a strange connection to her. He was the one who found her. He felt responsible. The head of ship security, a strong man named Taishik, came into the lab to look. He crossed his arms and looked at the pod. He saw the small woman inside. This is the great Terran warrior? Taishik said, a small smile on his face. She looks quite fragile. I think my grandmother is tougher. Minsu did not smile. She has been asleep for thousands of years, Taishik. Show some respect. Taishik just shrugged and walked away. Soon the lab was ready. June and his science team stood at their control panels. Captain Sujin watched from the observation room above. Minsu stood closest to the pod, his heart pounding in his chest. June looked at Sujin. She gave a single, firm nod. Begin the revival sequence, June said. Minsu pressed a series of buttons on the pod's control panel. The machine hummed to life. The green light began to blink faster. A soft hissing sound filled the room as the pod started to warm up. The frost on the glass began to melt, turning into little rivers of water. Everyone watched. No one made a sound. The only noise was the hum of the pod and the beating of their own hearts. They were bringing a ghost back to life. They had no idea what they were about to wake up. The hiss of the cryopod was the loudest sound in the silent lab. A puff of cold white vapor escaped from the edges as the heavy lid began to lift. Minsu held his breath. His hands felt clammy inside his gloves. Next to him, June watched with sharp, worried eyes from behind the safety of a control console. Up in the observation room, Captain Sujin stood perfectly still, her face a mask of calm control. The lid slid back fully, revealing the woman inside. For a long moment, nothing happened. She lay there, pale and still amidst the fading frost. Then a faint tremor ran through her. Her chest rose in a sudden shallow gasp. Her eyelids fluttered. Minsu took a hesitant step closer. "Hello?" he said softly, his voice amplified by the room's speaker system. "Can you understand me? You are safe." Her eyes opened. They were dark, deep brown, and they were not peaceful. They were filled with a storm of confusion. They darted around the room, taking in the bright lights, the strange faces, the unfamiliar technology. They moved quickly, sharply, like a predator assessing a new environment. They landed on Minsu, then moved past him to June, then up to the observation window where Sujin stood. She did not scream. She did not panic. She simply observed, her breath coming in small, visible puffs in the cold air of the pod. "Her vital signs are spiking," one of the science team said, his voice tense. "Adrenaline, cortisol, it's a classic fear response," but her face showed no fear. It showed intense, focused calculation. "Jihi," Minsu said, using the name from the pod. He pointed gently to himself. "My name is Minsu. We found you. We brought you to our ship." Her eyes locked onto his again. She still said nothing. She tried to push herself up on her elbows, but her arms trembled violently and gave way. She fell back into the pod with a soft thud. A look of pure frustration crossed her face. "She is weak," June observed, his tone a mix of relief and disappointment. "The long sleep has taken its toll. Her muscle atrophy is severe. Let's get her to the medbay." Captain Sujin's voice came through the comms. "Be gentle." Minsu and a female medic moved carefully to the sides of the pod. They reached in to help her. The moment their hands touched her arms, her whole body went rigid. It was not a flinch. It was a coiling, a preparation. Her eyes shot to Minsu's hand on her arm, then to his face. He saw something dangerous in that look, a flash of warning so sharp it made him pull his hand back for a second. "It's okay," the medic said in a soothing voice. "We are here to help you." Slowly, they helped her sit up and then to swing her legs over the side of the pod. Her legs could not hold her. She slumped against Minsu, her body light and frail. He could feel her shivering. He put an arm around her to steady her, and she allowed it, but her head was still on a swivel, her eyes still recording everything. The walk to the medbay was slow. They had to half-carry her. The crew they passed in the corridors stared. They saw a small, disoriented woman, shuffling along with help, wrapped in a thermal blanket. She looked lost and vulnerable. Tae-shik, the security chief, was waiting at the medbay doors. He looked her up and down, his earlier skepticism confirmed. He muttered to Soo-jin, who had come down from the observation deck. "This is the great terror of the stars? She can barely stand. She looks like a strong wind would knock her over." "Respect, Tae-shik," Soo-jin replied quietly, but her own eyes held a trace of doubt. The stories of the mighty Terrans seemed like just that now. Stories. In the medbay, they laid her on a soft white bed. The medical scanners hummed to life, moving over her body. Jun and his team began their work. They took scans of her brain, her bones, her organs. They took a small sample of her blood. They shone lights in her eyes. Through it all, Ji-hai was silent. She did not resist. She followed their instructions with slow, deliberate movements. When a scanner passed over her, she watched it with a deep focus, as if understanding its purpose. When they pricked her finger for blood, she looked at the tiny bead of red, then at the device that took it, her expression unreadable. Min-soo stayed by her side. He brought her a cup of water. She looked at the cup, then at him before taking it. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. He helped guide it to her lips. She drank, a small sip at first, then a long, grateful gulp. "Food," Min-soo said to one of the medics. "She must be hungry." They brought a nutrient paste, something easy for a recovering body to digest. She smelled it first, a small, cautious sniff. Then she tasted it. Her nose wrinkled slightly, but she ate it all, every last bit. Her body was crying out for energy. After the tests, Jun came over with a tablet full of data. "Fascinating," he said, mostly to himself. "Her cellular structure is incredibly dense. Her neural pathways are complex. There is scarring on her bones, old fractures that have healed, signs of past trauma." "What does that mean?" Min-soo asked. "It means she has lived a hard life," Jun said. "But currently her body is as weak as a newborn's. It will take weeks, maybe months, for her to regain basic strength." Ji-hai was listening. Her eyes were on Jun's tablet, trying to decipher the symbols. She seemed to understand that they were talking about her. Later, they left her to rest. They gave her a private room next to the medbay. Min-soo checked on her before he left for the night. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, not lying down. She was looking at her own hands, turning them over, opening and closing them into weak, trembling fists. The look of frustration was back, deeper this time. The next day was the same. She was quiet. She ate what they gave her. She did the exercises the medic suggested, her face tight with the effort of simply lifting her arm. The crew began to relax. The initial fear and excitement faded. She was not a threat. She was a patient. A Project Tae-shik and his security team no longer saw a need for a constant guard. They stopped standing at her door. They would just walk by occasionally, glance in and see the small, quiet woman sitting or sleeping. Min-soo, however, kept visiting. He felt sorry for her. He tried to talk to her, to show her things. He brought a datapad with images of Earth, of forests and oceans. She looked at them, her expression unchanging. He wasn't sure if she recognized her home or if it just looked like any other planet. One afternoon, he was sitting with her, showing her how the datapad worked. He scrolled through a gallery of images from the concordance, different planets, different species. He stopped on a picture of a friendly, bird-like alien from a peaceful world. Ji-hai reached out. Her hand was steadier today. She pointed a thin finger at the bird alien. "Yes," Min-soo said, encouraged. "That is a rill. They are a peaceful species. They are part of our concordance." She looked from the picture to Min-soo's face. Then for the first time she spoke. Her voice was hoarse from thousands of years of disuse, a dry rustle of sound. "All are peaceful?" Min-soo was so shocked to hear her speak he almost dropped the datapad. "Yes," he said, recovering. "The concordance is peaceful. We explore, we learn. We do not fight." She looked back at the image of the rill. Her dark eyes seemed to cloud over. She slowly shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. She did not say anything else. That night, Min-soo lay in his own bed thinking about that small shake of her head. It wasn't a disagreement. It was more like pity or disbelief. He thought about the scars on her bones June had found. He thought about the hard warrior look in her eyes when she first woke up. He thought about her patience, a patience that felt less like weakness and more like the stillness of a hunter waiting for the right moment. The rest of the crew saw a frail woman recovering from a long sleep. They saw what they wanted to see. But Min-Soo, who spent the most time with her, began to see the cracks in that picture. He saw the intense intelligence in her eyes when she watched the crew work. He saw the way she studied the layout of the room, the position of the door, the movement of people outside her window. She was not just resting. She was learning. She was gathering information. And as he finally drifted off to sleep, a cold worry settled in his stomach. They had woken her up. They had brought her onto their ship, a ship of a peaceful people. They had seen her weakness and felt safe. But Min-Soo was starting to wonder if they had made a very, very big mistake. The gentle hum of the Odyssey was the sound of normal life. For days, the ship had settled into a quiet routine. The discovery of Ji-Hai was still a major event, but the initial fear had faded. She was just the quiet woman in the med bay, slowly getting stronger. Min-Soo visited her every day. He saw small changes. Her hands did not shake as much when she held a cup. She could stand by herself for a full minute before her legs began to tremble. She still spoke very little, but her eyes were always watching, always learning. He was with her one evening, showing her how to use a spoon with the soft food the medbay provided. She was clumsy with it, her fingers still relearning simple tasks. "You are getting better," Min-Soo said with an encouraging smile. Ji-Hai looked at the spoon, then at her own hand, a faint line of frustration between her eyebrows. She did not reply. Suddenly, a low, blaring alarm cut through the quiet. A red light on the wall began to flash. Min-Soo jumped. Ji-Hai's head snapped up. The look of frustration vanished from her face, replaced by instant, sharp focus. It was the same look she had when she first woke up. A voice shouted from the ship's speakers. It was Captain Soo-Jin, but her calm was gone. Her voice was tight with urgency. "All hands. Battle stations. We are under attack. Unidentified vessel. They are firing." The Odyssey shuddered. It was a violent, jarring shake that threw Min-Soo against the wall. A tray of medical instruments clattered to the floor. The lights flickered and died for a second before the emergency red lights came on, painting the room in a bloody glow. "Pirates!" someone yelled from the corridor outside. "They're boarding. They're in the ship!" Min-Soo's heart hammered against his ribs. Pirates were a known danger in the outer sectors. They attacked lone ships, stole their cargo, and sometimes took prisoners. The Odyssey was a science vessel. It had minimal weapons and a small security team. He grabbed Ji-Hai's arm. "We have to go." "To the safe room!" She did not move. She was listening. Her head was tilted and her eyes were closed. She was filtering the sounds of the chaos, the alarms, the distant shouts, the terrifying thump of magnetic boots landing on the outer hull. Another explosion rocked the ship, closer this time. The door to the medbay hissed open. Jun ran in, his face pale with fear. "They've broken through the cargo bay airlock. Taeshik and his team are trying to hold them, but there are too many." Just then, the main door to the medbay exploded inward. The metal door twisted and flew off its rails, crashing into a medical console. Thick, choking smoke filled the doorway. Two figures stepped through. They were tall, bulky, and clad in rough, patched-up armor. They were Groll, a reptilian species known for their brutality. One had a scar across his snout. The other had a large plasma rifle held ready. Scar Snout laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Look here, Crag, a little med bay. Easy picking." The one called Crag scanned the room. His yellow eyes landed on June, then Min-Soo, and finally on Ji-Hee, who was still sitting on the bed. "What's this? A little lost thing?" June held up his hands. "Please, we are scientists." "We have no valuable cargo. Take what you want and leave." Crag took a step forward, his heavy boots clanging on the floor. "We'll be the judge of that." Min-Soo pushed Ji-Hee behind him, putting his own body between her and the pirates. He was trembling, but he stood his ground. "Leave her alone," Scarsnout chuckled. "Brave little worm." He swaggered forward and roughly shoved Min-Soo aside. Min-Soo cried out as he hit a cabinet and slid to the floor, his head spinning. The pirate now stood directly over Ji-Hai. He looked down at her thin frame, her calm face. He reached out a large clawed hand to grab her. "Don't be scared, little thing," he sneered. That was when everything changed. The moment his claw touched her shoulder, HFY moved. It was not the slow, weak movement of the past few days. It was a blur of terrifying speed and precision. Her hand shot up and grabbed his wrist. It wasn't a grab of panic. It was a firm, locking grip. The pirate's sneer turned to surprise. HFY's other hand chopped forward, the edge of her palm striking his throat with a sickening crunch. The pirate's eyes bulged. A gurgling sound escaped his lips. He dropped his weapon and clutched at his neck, stumbling backward. He crashed to the floor, gasping for air that would not come. It had taken less than a second. Craig stared, stunned. His friend was on the ground, choking. The small, frail woman was now standing beside the bed. Her posture was completely different. She was no longer slouched or weak. She stood tall, balanced on the balls of her feet. Her face was a cold, empty mask. Her eyes were locked on him, and they held no fear. They held a promise. With a roar of anger, Crag raised his plasma rifle. HFY was already moving. She didn't run away. She dove toward the fallen pirate, rolling smoothly and coming up with his dropped weapon in her hands. It was a heavy, brutish gun, but she handled it like it was a part of her. Crag fired. A bolt of superheated plasma sizzled through the air where she had been a moment before, scorching the wall. HFY didn't shoot back. She was already running, not away, but in a wide arc, using the medical beds and consoles as cover. Her movements were fluid and unpredictable. She was like smoke. Crag fired again and again, blasting holes in the equipment. He was big and strong, but he was slow and clumsy. She was fast and smart. Minsu watched from the floor, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. This was not the woman he had helped walk. This was someone else. This was a warrior. HFY stopped behind a large surgical table. She didn't peek out. She must have memorized Crag's position because she simply leaned out from the waist, fired a single shot, and leaned back. The plasma bolt hit Crag square in the shoulder of his weapon arm. He screamed as the armor melted and the flesh beneath sizzled. The heavy rifle clattered to the floor. Before the echo of the shot had faded, HFY was on the move again. She closed the distance between them in a few quick strides. Crag was clutching his wounded shoulder, his face twisted in pain and rage. He swung his other arm, a powerful blow that could have broken her neck. She ducked under it effortlessly. As she moved past him, she brought the butt of the rifle up hard, smashing it into the back of his knee. There was a loud crack. Crag bellowed in agony and collapsed. He lay on the ground, moaning. HFY stood over him. She pointed the rifle at his head. Her finger was on the trigger. Her face showed no emotion. It was just a job to be finished. HFY, no! Minsu shouted, finding his voice. She glanced at him. For a split second, the cold killer was gone, and he saw the woman he knew. She looked from Minsu's horrified face to the helpless pirate at her feet. She lowered the rifle. She didn't kill him, but she wasn't done. She quickly stripped Crag of a pistol from his hip and a few plasma cartridges. She tossed the heavy rifle away. It was too slow for her. The pistol was better. She walked over to Minsu and offered him a hand. He took it, and she pulled him to his feet with a strength that should not have been possible. Her grip was like iron. "Stay here," she said. Her voice was different now. It was clear, firm, and held a tone of command that brooked no argument. "Where are you going?" Minsu asked, his voice trembling. She looked toward the door, toward the sound of fighting and screaming that filled the ship's corridors. "The threat is not neutralized." And with that, she turned and ran out of the ruined medbay. She moved with a predator's grace, the pistol held ready. She was not running away from the danger. She was running straight into it. Minsu, June, and the injured pirates were left in the wrecked room. The only sounds were the blaring alarm and the moans of the two Groll. Minsu looked at the door where HFY had disappeared. The frail woman was gone. In her place was a storm, and the storm had just begun. The corridor outside the medbay was a scene of chaos. Smoke hung in the air, stinging the eyes. The red emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, making it hard to see. From further down the ship, the sounds of energy weapons and screams echoed. HFY stood at the doorway for less than a second. Her eyes scanned left, then right. She was not the woman from the medbay. Her body was a coiled spring. Every movement was efficient, with no wasted energy. She held the pirate's pistol in a two-handed grip close to her body. She heard heavy running footsteps to her right. 2 more Groll pirates were coming, their boots pounding on the metal floor. They were laughing, confident. They thought this was an easy victory. Ji-hai did not wait for them. She stepped out into the corridor. She did not stand in the middle. She stayed close to the wall in the shadows. The pirates saw her. They skidded to a stop, surprised. One of them raised his rifle. "Hey, stop right!" Ji-hai fired twice. 2 quick, precise shots. The first hit the pirate's rifle, blasting it from his hands. The second hit the other pirate in the leg. He screamed and fell. The first pirate stared at his empty, smoking hands in shock. Before he could react, Ji-hai was already moving past him. As she passed, she slammed the heavy pistol into the side of his head. He crumpled to the floor without a sound. She did not stop to check on them. She kept moving, her mind was clear. It was a feeling she knew well. The fog of the long sleep was gone, burned away by the fire of combat. Her body ached with a deep weakness, but her muscles remembered. Her instincts took over. This was what she was made for. She moved down the corridor like a ghost. She did not run. She used a quick, quiet walk, her feet making almost no sound. She paused at every corner, listening first, then peeking for the briefest moment. She could hear the main fight. It was coming from the ship's mess hall. The sound of plasma fire was concentrated there. The pirates had trapped someone. She found a side corridor that looped around toward the mess hall. It was a service duct, narrow and dark. She slipped inside. In the mess hall, the situation was desperate. Taishik and 4 of his security team were pinned down behind overturned tables. 3 of his people were already on the floor, wounded. The air smelled of burned metal and ozone. 5 Groll pirates had them cornered. The pirates were taking their time, firing shots to keep the security team's heads down. They were laughing and joking. "Just give up," one of them yelled. "Your ship is ours." Taishik fired back, but his shot went wide. He was a good security chief, but he was trained for patrols and small fights, not a full-on boarding action against ruthless pirates. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. He looked at his team. They were scared. They were going to die. Then something strange happened. A pirate at the back of the group who was watching the main door suddenly collapsed. There was no sound of a weapon. He just fell. Another pirate turned. "Boar, what's wrong with you?" A small metal canister rolled into the center of the room from a side vent. It was a smoke grenade taken from one of the fallen pirates. It hissed and thick white smoke poured out, filling the mess hall in seconds. "Smoke, I can't see!" a pirate shouted. Confusion took over. The pirates started firing blindly into the smoke. In the chaos, a shadow moved. It was Ji-hai. She used the smoke as her cover. She did not need to see. She remembered their positions from her quick peek. She moved through the white cloud like a shark through murky water. Taishik and his team heard it. They heard the sounds of close quarters fighting. Short, sharp cries of pain, the sickening thud of impacts, a gurgle. The clatter of a dropped weapon. It was over in seconds. The smoke began to clear. Taishik slowly raised his head from behind the table. The 5 pirates were on the ground. They were not just shot. They were broken. Arms bent at wrong angles. One was clutching his throat, gasping silently. Another was unconscious with a deep gash on his head. They were all disarmed and disabled, and standing in the middle of them was Ji-hai.
She was breathing a little faster now, but her face was still calm.
She held the pistol, but it had not been fired. She had taken them all down without using a single shot. She looked at Taishik. Her eyes were the same dark eyes he had seen in the med bay, but now he saw the truth in them. He saw the cold, hard strength. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's air. She pointed to the wounded security officers. "Help them," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried absolute authority. Taishik could only nod, stunned. Ji-hai turned and ran back out into the corridor. She was not finished. The ship was not secure. She moved toward the engine room. That was the heart of the ship. If the pirates controlled it, they controlled everything. She encountered 2 more pirates on the way. They saw her and fired. Ji-hai did not duck behind cover. She moved. She dropped into a slide, moving under their line of fire. As she slid, she fired 2 shots. Both pirates fell, clutching their wounded shoulders. She reached the engine room doors. They were sealed shut from the inside. The pirates had locked themselves in. Ji-hai did not look for a control panel. She looked at the door. It was a strong door, but it had a weak point, the hydraulic mechanism that opened and closed it. She aimed her pistol at the small gap where the door met the wall. She fired 3 times in the same spot. Sparks flew. There was a grinding sound and then a hiss of leaking fluid. The door shuddered and slid open a foot before getting stuck. She could hear panicked voices inside. She squeezed through the narrow opening. Inside, 3 pirates were trying to get the main engine controls offline. They spun around as she entered. The fight was short and brutal. The engine room was full of large, humming machinery. Jihai used it to her advantage. She was small and fast. They were big and clumsy in the tight space. She disarmed the first one with a sharp kick to his wrist. She used his own body as a shield against the second one's fire. She threw a heavy wrench she found on a console. It hit the third pirate in the face with a crack. In 10 seconds, all 3 were on the ground, unconscious. She walked over to the control panel. Her fingers flew over the buttons. It was alien technology, but the principles were the same: power, control, stability. She quickly reset the systems the pirates had tried to disable. The deep hum of the engine stabilized. She turned and left the engine room without a backward glance. Her final destination was the bridge. That was where the command would be. That was where the leader would be. She ran through the quieting ship. The sounds of fighting had almost stopped. She passed other crew members who were now cautiously coming out of hiding. They saw her, this small woman with fierce eyes and a pistol, moving with a purpose they could not understand. They pressed themselves against the walls to let her pass. She reached the bridge doors. They were also sealed. She could hear shouting from inside. Captain Sujin's voice, firm but strained. And a deeper, rougher voice, the pirate captain. Jihai took a deep breath. She was tired now. Her borrowed strength was fading. But she was not done. She raised her pistol and fired at the door control. It exploded in a shower of sparks. The door slid open. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at her. The bridge was frozen in a scene of tense standoff. Captain Sujin and her 2 helmsmen had their hands in the air. A massive Groll pirate, bigger than the others, stood in the center of the room. He held a large, menacing rifle pointed directly at Sujin. This was their leader. 2 more pirates covered the other crew members. The pirate leader had been in the middle of demanding the ship's access codes. The sudden opening of the doors made him spin around, his weapon swinging away from Sujin. He saw a small, dark-haired woman standing in the doorway. She was breathing heavily. She held a standard pirate pistol, but it was aimed at the floor. She looked exhausted. Her clothes were smudged with smoke and a little blood that was not her own. The pirate leader laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "What is this? One little female? Did you get lost?" He took a step toward her, his weapon now pointed at her chest. He was not worried. She looked like she could barely stand. Jihai did not answer him. Her eyes moved past him and met Sujin's across the bridge. In that brief look, Sujin saw something that made her blood run cold. It was not a plea for help. It was a signal. A warning. Then Jihai's eyes dropped to the floor for a split second, then back to the pirate leader. The leader took another step. "Drop the gun, little thing. Before I get angry." Jihai's fingers opened. The pistol clattered to the floor. The leader smirked. "Good. Now..." He never finished his sentence. The moment the gun hit the floor, Jihai moved. But she didn't move forward. She dropped straight down into a low crouch. At the exact same instant, Captain Sujin, understanding the unspoken signal, shouted a single word to her computer. "Lights!" The entire bridge was plunged into absolute perfect darkness. The pirates yelled in surprise and confusion. Their eyes, adapted to the bright bridge lights, were now blind, but Jihai was not blind. She had known it was coming. The moment of darkness was all she needed. The pirate leader fired his rifle, a wild blast of plasma that lit up the darkness for a moment and scorched the ceiling. He was firing at where she had been standing, but she was no longer there. In the blackness, the crew heard sounds. They were quick, sharp, brutal sounds. A grunt of pain, the crack of bone, a choked cry, the thud of a heavy body hitting the floor. It was over in less than 5 seconds. The lights came back on. The 2 pirates who had been guarding the crew were on the ground, unconscious. The massive pirate leader was also on his knees. Jihai stood behind him. One of her arms was wrapped around his thick neck, cutting off the air. Her other hand was pulling back hard on a pressure point behind his jaw. His face was turning purple. His eyes were wide with shock and panic. His rifle lay on the floor, far out of his reach. He was completely helpless. Jihai looked at Sujin. Her expression was calm, but her chest was rising and falling rapidly from the effort. "The ship?" she asked, her voice rough. Su-jin, her hands still in the air from the shock, slowly lowered them. She looked at her control panel. Reports were coming in from all over the ship. The fighting has stopped. Security teams are reporting. All hostiles are down." She looked at Ji-hai, her voice full of awe. You did it. You saved the ship." Slowly, Ji-hai released her hold. The pirate leader gasped and collapsed forward, coughing and clutching his throat. He was defeated. Taishik and a few of his security team, having heard the shot, rushed onto the bridge. They stopped dead, their weapons raised, but there was nothing to shoot. They saw the fallen pirates. They saw their captain safe. And they saw Ji-hai standing over the defeated pirate leader. The silence on the bridge was heavy. No one knew what to say. They looked at the small, tired woman and the trail of destruction she had left through their ship. The frail patient was gone. The truth was standing right in front of them. Min-su arrived out of breath. He had followed the path of defeated pirates, his fear for her growing with each one he passed. He saw her on the bridge unharmed. The tension in his body melted away, replaced by a profound relief. Ji-hai looked at the faces around her. She saw the fear, the shock, the confusion. She saw the way Taishik looked at her now, not with dismissal but with a new, wary respect. She walked over to the pirate pistol she had dropped and picked it up. She held it out to Taishik, handle first. Taishik hesitated for a moment, then took it. "I am sorry," Ji-hai said quietly. She wasn't looking at anyone in particular. "I am sorry you had to see this." Su-jin finally found her voice. "Sorry? You saved all of our lives. We are in your debt." Ji-hai shook her head slowly. She looked tired, not from the fight, but from something deeper. "No, you are peaceful people. You should never have to know this. This violence. It is a dark thing." She walked toward the large main viewport. Outside, the stars shone, cold and bright and endless. She placed a hand on the cool glass. "This was my world," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "This was what I was made for. I had hoped it was gone." The crew watched her. They finally understood. Her strength was not a gift. It was a burden. A terrible skill born from a time of war they could not even imagine. Min-su came to stand beside her.
Ji-hai?
He said softly. She turned to look at him. The warrior was gone again. In her eyes he saw the woman from the medbay, but now there was a deep sadness there. "Thank you, Min-su," she said, "for your kindness." The cleanup began. The pirates were rounded up and locked in the ship's brig. The wounded were cared for. The damage was assessed, but the mood on the ship had changed forever. They had been saved by the very thing they had feared. The relic they had awakened was not a monster. She was a protector. But she was a protector from a violent past that had now touched their peaceful lives. Ji-hai did not go back to the medbay. She stood on the bridge, a silent figure by the viewport. The crew gave her space. They did not treat her like a patient anymore. They did not treat her like a specimen. They treated her with a quiet reverence. They had seen her strength. They had seen the cost of it. And they knew without a doubt that they had been wrong. They had awakened a human she from Cryo Slumber, and they would never ever regret it, for her strength had become their shield.